Hey folks, welcome. Glad you're watching. This is Warriors Pro Wrestling. This is our weekly video. Today, I'm going to jump right into it. If you haven't watched our past videos, we've done a 2 How WWE Should Have Booked. We've looked at Cesaro's post-WrestleMania 30 push after winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. And we have looked at Kofi Kingston's failed push in 2009. Go check that out. Kofi Kingston's push will come up slightly in today's How WWE Should Have Booked. We're going to be doing a number of different video style and content on the Warriors Pro Wrestling YouTube channel. So far, we've just done 2 How WWE Should Have Booked, and today we're doing another one. And today we're looking at another failed push, and that would be Drew McIntyre's back in 2011, I believe. So there were some good things out of this. First of all, I don't want to look too much back on the career. I mean, we know he went to 3MB and all that, so I don't want to look too much on that. I want to focus on where it was good and where it kind of fell off the rails and how we can fix it. So, the start of his career was very good. I mean, he won the Intercontinental title. He was promoted as the Chosen One by Vince McMahon. That always helps. It was a really good way to bring him in. He had a good gimmick. He had that kind of thing. He was that Chosen One. He was that rightful, that protected champion by Mr. McMahon. It was a great thing. So, he's got the Intercontinental title. He had some rivalries with R-Truth, John Morrison, Kane. I mean, at the time, not giant names of the industry, but they got him over. They got his foot in the door, and it was a great way to start. You get some wins under your belt. He looked like a strong Intercontinental champion. It started going wrong at WrestleMania 26 for me. That was when it started going off the rails. He was in the Money in the Bank ladder match, he lost that, and then he never really felt important again. He never really was in a major storyline after that. So here's how I would have done it. I don't change much, other than he doesn't get replaced on the bragging rights Team SmackDown team. That felt unnecessary, and I don't think you need to have that. It's an unnecessary blemish on his early run. So I just take that out. He's on the bragging rights team. Team SmackDown wins, and it's another victory that he can help with. He helps the team win. So here's what we do. We start basically changing this at WrestleMania 26. He's not in the Money in the Bank ladder match. If you go back and watch how I booked Kofi Kingston's push in 2009, you'll know that I have Kofi winning that and cashing in the briefcase the same night, defeating Chris Jericho to become the World Heavyweight Champion after Jericho defeats Edge. So, McIntyre's not in that match. Instead, he goes to Vince McMahon a few weeks before and tells him he wants to really prove himself as a future world champion and as a legitimate Intercontinental champion. So, he says, I want you to find me a former World Heavyweight Champion, bring him to WrestleMania 26, and I will defend my Intercontinental Championship against a former World Heavyweight Champion of your choice. So, McIntyre basically says it's an open challenge to a former World Heavyweight Champion. I think that really makes him look like a stronger champion. So, at the time, I really think there was only 2 potential candidates that could have done it. And they did return to the WWE later on. By the next WrestleMania, they did return. So, here's what we have. JBL or Booker T. One of those two. I know they're not like Stone Cold or The Rock, but they're former world champions. They're legitimate. You can bring them in. You don't have to bring them in long term at this point. You can bring them in long term when they are available long term. But this is just for a one-off, just to give McIntyre a good win at WrestleMania over a former world champion. So McIntyre defeats either Booker or JBL, has that win, is still the Intercontinental Champion. After WrestleMania 26, he goes on to a feud with Edge. Now, the undefeated streak for McIntyre ended, I believe, at the hands of The Undertaker. I believe that was his first loss when Undertaker beat him. I would change that. That was on March 19th. I would change that. McIntyre doesn't win clean over The Undertaker. I don't think you can do that yet. But he does get the win via DQ, or probably because of an interference from Shawn Michaels, because Shawn was trying to get the WrestleMania 26 match at that time, I believe. So you can have the interference there and help McIntyre get that DQ win. The winning streak stays alive, and it adds to the Michaels and Taker feud. Now, the undefeated streak ends. I wish I could say that it would last like a longer time and it would end to someone who needs it, but I think it really helps develop the storyline for this. The undefeated streak ends on SmackDown in a non-title match to Edge. That leads to Edge getting a shot at the Intercontinental Championship, not the World Heavyweight Championship now. He can back off. He'll have his run later on. He'll probably wind up world champion by WrestleMania 27 anyway. So, McIntyre puts his title on the line at Extreme Rules against Edge. McIntyre retains. Then, at the next pay-per-view, which I believe is Over the Limit, let me just make sure. Yes. Over the Limit, he defends the Intercontinental Championship again against Edge. The third match, the trilogy. McIntyre gets the win. And with the win, there's an added stipulation. The winner of that match would join the Fatal 4-Way match at the next month's pay-per-view, Fatal 4-Way, for the World Heavyweight Championship. McIntyre wins, he's the Intercontinental Champion, and has the opportunity to become dual champion. Now, he earns the first spot into the world title match. At Fatal 4-Way, Rey Mysterio defeats champion going into it Kofi Kingston, CM Punk, and Drew McIntyre. Now, McIntyre doesn't get pinned, but he doesn't win the world title. Rey can pin Punk. That sets up a feud with Rey and Punk. And you can have a triple threat at Money in the Bank. Rey retains over Kofi and CM Punk. And then you can have Kane's cash in, because that was admittedly a pretty good cash in. So, Kane can cash in, win the world title, and then that sets up the whole summer thing with Taker and Mysterio and Kane and all that. Now, you might be wondering why I would say that the world title picture is going to be Kane and Undertaker and Rey Mysterio in the summer. And why I'm not changing all that. Well, it's because after this, on the SmackDown following Fatal 4-Way, Drew McIntyre, it's announced that due to issues between the GM, Teddy Long, and Drew McIntyre, which, I mean, half the early storyline was that Teddy Long didn't like Drew McIntyre and vice versa. So Mr. McMahon decides the issues are too personal, the issues are too heated. McIntyre gets traded to Raw with the Intercontinental Championship. And what goes back to SmackDown? The United States Champion, The Miz. The Miz. So, at Money in the Bank, you can have Rey Mysterio versus Kofi versus Punk for the world title. The Miz can be in the Money in the Bank ladder match, like McIntyre was on SmackDown, and he lost. And on Raw, Drew McIntyre wins the Raw Money in the Bank ladder match. This allows the Kane, Undertaker, and Rey storyline to go through. You don't have to change that. And it gives a fresh start. It gives something big to McIntyre. It gives the Money in the Bank. Let me just flip to the next page of my notes. At Money in the Bank, instead of Miz, McIntyre wins the Raw Money in the Bank contract, as I mentioned, and he goes on and he has the contract. Now, I don't change too much about the time of the cash-in as Miz did it for McIntyre. I think it was good, but here's what we do. So, basically, instead of Miz, McIntyre gets that push. That's basically the point. That's basically what happens. McIntyre, at SummerSlam, is asked to join Team WWE against the Nexus, like Miz was. He doesn't give an answer until the match, when Daniel Bryan returns to be the seventh man on that team instead. It won't have quite as much a meaning than when Miz was the guy, and they brought Bryan in because The Miz was the pro for Daniel Bryan on NXT. It won't have quite as much meaning, but it still will because Daniel Bryan was part of the Nexus. So he's still like an internet darling. So it's still gonna have that meaning. And Drew McIntyre is still gonna be a top heel. So McIntyre drops the Intercontinental title to Daniel Bryan, like The Miz dropped the United States title to Daniel Bryan in real life. He drops the title at Night of Champions, just like it happened. Hell in a Cell, McIntyre again falls to Bryan. You can have the triple threat match. John Morrison can get beat, can get pinned or tap out or whatever you want to do. McIntyre doesn't have to be the one who takes the loss. But McIntyre fails to reclaim the Intercontinental Championship. So now he needs to start winning. He's lost 2 pay-per-views in a row and kind of looks silly at SummerSlam. So you need to get him back on the winning way. McIntyre captains Team Raw to victory over SmackDown at bragging rights. You need to do it. It's that simple. You have to give him something. So Team Raw goes over Team SmackDown, captained by Drew McIntyre. That, I think, gives him... I mean, does anyone really put a whole lot of stock in that? Did anyone ever put a whole lot of stock in the bragging rights tag match? Probably not, but it's still an accomplishment to get him back on the winning way. That's all it does. That's all I am putting it in. McIntyre then goes on to cash in the Money in the Bank contract against Randy Orton. He wins the WWE Championship and successfully defends and retains the title against Orton at TLC and the Royal Rumble like it happened in real life. The night following the Rumble, Drew McIntyre comes out and he says, I beat everybody. I beat everybody I've ever been put up against. Except one guy. One guy bested me. One guy I've never beaten. And it's been eating away at me. And that's Daniel Bryan. At Elimination Chamber, I want Daniel Bryan in a champion versus champion match. So it's set. I know it kind of comes out of the blue, but think about it. He never beat Daniel Bryan. He's the WWE champion. He should want to beat everybody he's ever been put up against. So he challenges Daniel Bryan. Come on. Bring it. I want you at Elimination Chamber. I want to beat you, finally. Champion versus champion. Non-title. I don't want to do that. You could, but it wouldn't really work at this point. So it's a non-title champion versus champion. I know they do champion versus champion a lot in WWE, and I know they can really kind of not feel special. But this is, I mean, doing it between 2 guys who are really good in the ring, who fans, maybe not in terms of face or heel, maybe they don't like McIntyre, but in terms of wrestling, they do. It would be a great match, and I think it can really be a meaningful champion versus champion match. Now, I'd probably give the win to McIntyre here. I think he needs to get the win going into WrestleMania, especially with John Cena winning the Elimination Chamber. Yes, I know. I'm still having John Cena win the Elimination Chamber. I'm sorry. He has to. I think with a guy as new as McIntyre, the main event of WrestleMania, you're going to have The Rock involved. You still want to set up Rock versus Cena for the next year because it was a great moment. Cena wins the Elimination Chamber to become number 1 contender, and he gets the WWE title shot at WrestleMania in the main event against Drew McIntyre, who defeats Daniel Bryan in a non-title champion versus champion match, which you build up to be bigger, by the way. One note for the build-up to the McIntyre versus Cena match at Mania. This is where we're going now. McIntyre versus Cena at WrestleMania 27. The bad one, by the way. So, The Rock needs to be less prominent. In real life, one of the biggest reasons The Miz's title reign was a complete joke was A, he wasn't that good, and B, his WrestleMania moment, his WrestleMania title defense, it was a glorified Rock versus Cena 1 with just The Miz there. Miz didn't even feel part of that storyline. It was just The Rock and Cena. It was The Rock and Cena with The Miz. So you need to make Rock less prominent. Obviously, you still want to have some of the shenanigans. You can do the rap battles and whatnot for a couple weeks, but make it more about McIntyre v. Cena. Make that the thing. You can still have Cena versus Rock banter, but make McIntyre a big focus of it. Bring McIntyre in. One of the things that should have happened with Miz and needs to happen with McIntyre, on one of the Raws, Rock and Cena are out there. McIntyre, by the end of the segment, has laid them both out. I know he laid out Cena in one of them. He needs to lay out both. I want him to give a Future Shock DDT to both The Rock and Cena and stand over top of them. And, wow, this guy put down The Rock and John Cena. Now, you look at WrestleMania 27 and McIntyre defeats Cena, okay? McIntyre defeats Cena like The Miz defeated Cena. However, I don't know if I want to have The Rock interfere. He probably needs to set up WrestleMania 28, but if you can do it in a way that can set up WrestleMania 28 without having The Rock so blatantly cost Cena the match, preferably, if it has to happen that way, fine. Preferably The Rock isn't involved in such a huge way in the WWE Championship match, and really put that, and really we keep the asterisks beside McIntyre's reign to a very low number. So why do I think this story is better? Why do I think this is better than what actually happened? First of all, there's no 3MB. I think that's a whole lot better. Now, another reason is what I'm going to do after WrestleMania, because you have to have a plan. WWE doesn't usually know that, but you have to have a plan. So after that, McIntyre's reign becomes, I don't want to say like average, but it becomes fairly generic for the moment. He retains the title. He keeps the title over a feud. You can have him beat Cena, Morrison, Truth, all those guys who were in the title picture somehow. Now, he does eventually lose the title to John Cena. And that is just to build up the Cena versus Punk storyline in the summer. He holds the title until Punk is ready, until Punk becomes a challenger, until Punk is his number one contender. He holds the title until feuding with CM Punk. Now, at that point, he does need to drop it to Cena just to let Punk versus Cena happen, because that was a much better match for the walkout, I think. The match really felt bigger in Chicago, Punk versus Cena. You can do it with McIntyre, but I think it's better with Cena. Now, you do have McIntyre retain, you do have McIntyre eventually get it back, but that will be further explained next week when I talk about the rebooking of how I would have done the Summer of Punk. Yes, next week I'm doing the Summer of Punk rebooking. This is mainly part one of a big thing, but that is how I would have done it. This gives McIntyre a much better career, basically. This means he might still be in WWE today if this happened. Now, one more thing it also does is when Punk, after he came back, and it was the Summer of Punk, even though it was kind of the winter, Punk had that conspiracy theory against Triple H and kind of the McMahon regime. I think that conspiracy theory makes a lot more sense if McIntyre is at the top, because he was the chosen one. I think that really helps along the idea of a conspiracy theory, if that's what you really want to do. You want to have a conspiracy theory, have a guy who was handpicked by the chairman himself be at the top. And yeah, I think it makes McIntyre a much more credible champion. I think it makes him a much more credible superstar in the WWE. And I think it feels more special. I think it feels better. I think it's a much better choice than The Miz to get that push, because I think McIntyre is a much better wrestler, superstar than The Miz. I think with the right booking, he can get just as much heat. And it'll provide some great moments. It'll provide McIntyre going over on The Rock and Cena in a segment. It'll provide just some great moments. And then you'll find out more about what I do with McIntyre when I come up next week with the Summer of Punk and what I do there. This is part 1 of how I would have booked the McIntyre, the Chosen One push / the Summer of Punk, because they do connect. That's all we got today, folks. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to the Warriors Junior Hockey channel. Follow on Spreaker, follow on Twitter, all that kind of good stuff. Like the video, watch the past clips, Cesaro's push, Kofi's push, and next week, like I said, we will come back with part 2, which will focus more on the Summer of Punk part of it. That's all we got time for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Again, like, subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. Thanks for watching, and I hope we'll see you next week.